Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Tired Flight Attendant is Ordered to Get an In-Flight Movie That Is Interesting Enough and Maliciously Complies. This malicious compliance belongs to my beautiful wife, but since it is from many decades ago, from a time before we knew each other, we will call her Classy Flight Attendant here. First, the usual disclaimers. I am on a computer, so completely responsible for the formatting. English is both my first and third language, and my mother was a school teacher, so I am also completely responsible for my use of grammar and spelling. Although I do not care to hear about it if the spelling tends to vacillate between British and American standards. Or the punctuation for that matter. Dialogue is translated from the original language and is given as reported to me. The setup. At the time of this event, Classy Flight Attendant is one of the top-tier flight attendants for her country's national airline. Strictly speaking, any of their flights that do not involve ports in the USA or its territories, are not required to follow all FAA rules. However, whenever they fly to ports regulated by the FAA, they are expected to follow those rules to the T. Of course, it doesn't always work out that way in practice. On this occasion, Classy Flight Attendant has just landed from Europe at her home airport in South America, only to learn that she is being turned around for a round trip to New York City. She protests. By the time she lands in New York, she will be well outside FAA rest period rules with all the consequences that could follow. Her supervisors don't care. They need her on that flight right now. And away she goes. But she knows the flight to New York isn't the real problem. It's the return trip that will be pure misery. Her compatriots flying home from New York tend to be extremely entitled. They are coming from New York. That makes them somebody now. They will refuse drink service when offered, and then when the flight attendant is 3 or 4 rows further along, push the call button and order a drink. They will keep an attendant hoping back and forth the whole flight for stupid little things, many of them things they could actually do for themselves. Classy Flight Attendant is tired, and knows that dealing with this entitled crowd on the return trip is going to be the worst. As they get into New York, she is told to go check out an in-flight movie for the return trip. The suggestion is made to make it interesting enough to keep the passengers too busy to order the flight crew around that much. The malicious compliance. As she looks over the options and finds the perfect film. It will keep the passengers riveted to their seats. Frankly, given the nature of the film, she isn't even sure why it exists in the cartridge format used on planes at this time. Perhaps because the format is also used on some yachts and cruise ships? She orders it. Once on board, she keeps it secret. She knows that once she pops it in and it starts to play, the systems in use at that time cannot be stopped. But any time before that, she could be thwarted. Mid-flight, as the plane is well out over the ocean on its way south, she pops it in. Airport 77. For those who don't know, this film is about an airplane crashing in the ocean and passengers and crew trying to escape with their lives from 100 feet underwater. The results are immediate and absolute. While there are many white knuckles, no one seems inclined to press their call buttons. And Classy Flight Attendant has a very quiet, uninterrupted rest for the remainder of the flight home. The aftermath. As she is deboarding, one old lady is heard to say that she will never fly national airline again. When called on the carpet for her movie choice, Classy Flight Attendant feigns ignorance, claiming to have thought it was the much more comical Airplane. And that the name was lost in translation. She is given a 3-day suspension, which is for her a much-needed rest. Oh, and she will never be allowed to pick the in-flight movie ever again. Next one is titled, A Car She Could Afford. This isn't my story. A family friend who is a driver's ed teacher told it to me. It concerned a former student of his. This takes place in Europe, so US rules may not apply. Said student came from a modest background, went to law school and ended up at a good firm, started dating a colleague there and eventually got engaged to him. This is where our story starts. The guy's family was old money rich and they told his bride-to-be that they would buy her a car of her choice as their wedding gift. So she went car shopping. What we need to know, at this point, is that she didn't look like a big-shot lawyer outside the office. Her free-time style, as it was described to me, was something like a goth punk mix. So she went to a car dealership in her hometown. Nothing fancy, but she wasn't there for a Ferrari. She just wanted a nice new car and figured she'd spend the money where she grew up. So she walked around the dealership looking at a couple new Mercedes, when a car salesman walked up to her. He looked her up and down and said condescendingly, "Go look cars you can afford, girl." She left and she was pretty upset. When she told her future in-laws, they were sympathetic, but they also pointed out that they'd like to get her a better car than the dealership in question had for sale. They suggested she pick a super fancy car. Author's note: I'm not that interested in cars, so I can't remember what it was. It was rare in Europe and the driver's ed teacher's eyes shone brightly when he talked about that one time she let him test drive. You're gonna have to take my word, as I took his, that this car was something else. The super fancy car had to be imported from the US, so it took a while until the lawyer got her wedding gift. When she finally had it, she drove it to her hometown dealership. This time she didn't look like a goth punk, this time she dressed up. She even wore long gloves. She walked into the dealership and asked to speak to the boss. When she was led into his office, she put her vehicle registration certificate on his desk in front of him, without saying a word. The boss went a bit pale. He thought she wanted to sell him this car, which he couldn't afford to buy from her. "No," she said, "I don't want to sell my car. I came here because I bought it following your employee's recommendation. I love this car and just wanted to thank him." Now the boss was confused. So she added, "You see, he told me to look at cars I could afford, so I did and I got this one." The irate boss asked her to point out the employee in question and started to tear into him. He wasn't an employee there for much longer. Next one is titled, "Want me to show your shitty and overpriced apartments to new tenants?" Fine. Context: me and my girl have recently moved into this new apartment complex that's definitely way too overpriced compared to what you get, also to find out that it's not soundproof at all. I live on the second floor and on first floor is the motorbike garage. Living in Vietnam, so everyone ride motorbikes here. It's definitely way too loud. You can hear guesses other tenant coming in and out of the house like the doors and walls aren't even there. To top it off, there's a jail cell-like gate at the front door. Every time someone in the complex comes in or out of the house, it sounds like a nightmare. Especially at 1 to 2 a.m., it's like having someone smash a too heavy metal object together next to your ears. Not to mention loud bikes. Others' issues were like, no internet for 2 weeks after we move in, electric outlet not working, etc. Compliance. Anyways, after 2 months of BS we had enough and decide to move out. The owner wasn't happy, but she can't do shit because we only signed a 2-month contract, normally 3, but gut feeling tell me to sign 2 only, paid bit more but duck it. She keeps trying to get us to show the apartment to new tenants because we work from home. At first we thought what a hassle, then it hit us that we should be warning these people of how shitty it is living here. So for next 2 weeks every tenant coming to see the apartment we explained to them exactly how shitty it was, if no one else from the apartment's complex's side come along. If there was someone coming with, we would be trying to give signs of some sort such as shaking our heads or signing no with our mouth behind the owner's back and so on. Most of the new tenants understood the signs straight away and walk away with a happy face. The most satisfying part was when couples with newborn babies coming to see the apartment or young singles moms. Hell, I sleep easy, but with the gate situation downstairs the babies and their moms would definitely have a shit time here. It was so satisfying to let them know that how much of a nightmare and overpriced this apartment is and that they are better off at other places. Made our day much better knowing we did something good. Next one is titled, "Keep Picking Me for a Random Locker Search?" Meet my underwear. Many years ago I worked for an outdoor activity center, Playland, in the retail department. Throughout the park there were many different shops that we manned, and I absolutely loved working there despite it being hard work for little pay. One day I had a run-in with a manager who seriously berated me in front of the entire team along with others from different departments. I was advised by a manager from a different team to make a formal complaint, which I did. Others came out with similar complaints and said manager was advised to find employment elsewhere, but not sacked. Now, unbeknownst to me, I triggered the chain of events that would lead to me leaving the company. Now, before the main story, there's some background info that is relevant to my malicious compliance. There were a few rules in place that were designed to prevent theft, including no more than £10 to be allowed on the shop floor, which was to be checked before your shift. Anything over this must be declared to management and left in your locker, and all staff had to agree to random locker, pocket searches. In the 2 years I'd worked here had never been picked for a random search. There were around several hundred employees, so the odds were incredibly slim. As soon as our disgraced manager left, I suddenly found myself picked at random for a search. This involved turning out my pockets, removing my shoes, socks, and then being escorted to the locker room to empty the contents out. Nothing was found, so I was sent back to the shop floor. The following week I was again picked at random for a search, which again turned up nothing. Rumors were soon doing the rounds that I had upset my department's remaining management team after instigating the action against my former manager, and they were going to force me out using any means necessary. I realized that I needed to act, so started job hunting and then began my malicious compliance. I started taking a backpack to work filled with £20 in pennies. Every morning I declared the amount in my locker as required, and sure enough, after a couple of days I was once again selected for my weekly, random, search. I got paid to watch a security guard and supervisor count 2,000 pennies. As expected, I passed said search and off I went. This happened a second time with now £30 in pennies, and I decided to up my game. At the start of the following week I patiently awaited my random search with glee, knowing what awaited them. The day soon arrived and off I was marched to the lockers ready for their treat. I lift out my backpack and pass it to the security guard and supervisor, who dive straight in without any gloves. Oh, how they retched as they discovered what was in there. I had several pairs of my period-soaked pants waiting in there especially for them. They were gingerly laid on the floor beside my bag as they counted my bag of pennies. The smell from the pants was unreal. They'd been festering in there for days in anticipation. Once again the search revealed nothing, and off to work I went. After that I was not picked for another search again. I left after a couple more weeks to a new job. Keeping in touch with some people, I discovered that new rule was introduced that tried dictating what you could and couldn't take to work with you. This soon led to a mass walkout of staff, and after a year the place shut down due to unrelated matters. Next one is titled, Bag Checker Meets Shark Week. I went to a large university in NYC, back in the days when you had to physically visit the library. When you entered, you had to show the contents of your backpack. They really didn't want people bringing food in. The main guy working the bag check was an absolute dick. He loved poking into your stuff, and he was just rude about it. He'd sit on the other side of this enormous desk and make you open up every single thing just because he could. He gave girls an extra hard time. He got really aggressive one day about a white paper bag I had because he thought it was a bakery bag, actually from the pharmacy, and it gave me an idea. I prepared carefully. I went into the library, plopped my backpack in front of him, and unzipped it. I made sure the open zipper was hanging over his side of the desk. Him. Open the white bag. Me. No. Him. Open the bag. Me. You don't need to see that. It's not food. Him. Getting really excited. Open the bag. You're not getting into the library otherwise. So I reached in and pulled the white paper bag out. My carefully prepared tear in the bottom of the bag, and my previously opened box, worked perfectly. 48 unwrapped tampons cascaded over the desk, his lap, and all over the floor. He reacted as if I had poured a bucket of snakes over him. He was so horrified I was afraid he would actually vomit on the spot. He had to pick up every single one. And he never made me open a bag again. Next one is titled, Leave If I Don't Like It? Fine, I'll leave. Last year I went to my uncle's house for Thanksgiving. I cooked the turkey the day before and put it into the fridge before going to sleep on their couch. I woke up to their young kid screaming in my face to make him chicken nuggets at 4 a.m. in the morning. They never make him behave, nor punish him for anything he does, so I ignored him and went back to sleep after he decided to go scream at his parents he wanted nuggets. Cut to 9 a.m. Everyone is getting things ready for the day. Cooking is beginning for the dishes that need a few hours in the oven. They didn't buy a turkey, they asked me to buy one. I decided to cook it the day before and thought we could toss it into the oven an hour before the time to eat arrived so it would be warm. However, their kid started randomly coming up behind me and screaming as loudly as he could into my ear. I asked them to make him stop, seeing as I prefer my hearing intact and don't like anyone just screaming in my ear for no good reason. I was told by my uncle, word for word, "It's our house, if you don't like it, leave." They were shocked when I actually did just that. I opened the fridge, took my turkey out, got into my car and drove away. Not 1 minute after leaving I was getting spammed by calls and texts asking, begging, or threatening me to come back with the only turkey for Thanksgiving. When I got home, I called him, and told him, "You told me to leave if I didn't like it, so I left, play stupid games, win stupid prizes," then hung up, and blocked his number. I have many stories about them refusing to control their kids, then them having to deal with the consequences that result in this. Last one is titled, You Want to Understaff and It Needs to Be Clean. So I worked in a fast casual restaurant where I would end up completely understaffed. AKA one grill cook and me a supervisor. So no one to help run registers, work the fry station, clean tables, etc. So at the end of the night I would end up doing everything up front and my amazing grill cook would clean the back. I'd let her stay as long as she wanted. And I also got to stay till everything was done. We'd close the store at 10:30. I'm out the door past 12. My boss always said call him if no one showed up. But to be honest, he never answered. Also, since I worked nights I stopped seeing him altogether. He would get mad that I would stay so late. Eventually I just ended up working the 40+ hour weeks I actually needed instead of the 5-hour blocks, aka 35 hours per week, he gave everyone. Eventually the guy that comes in to rate the store is in on my night. He's watching me run through a rush like the back of my hand. I finally get a trainee, I felt so bad. So she works one register slowly. I have everything else. At the end of the night, the guy comes up to me to tell me, "I unfortunately have to rate you low since you couldn't clean tables every 20 minutes. But I've never seen someone work so hard. I was stunned you were able to get anything done." Me. Thanks happen a lot. The next week we are just about fully staffed on my nights. I stepped down to trainee after a month and the quit a week later. Before that I never thought of myself as worth anything to a company. Now I look for jobs I could be proud of working for, with pay that I am worth. Thanks for listening.